All right, so let's dive into this mystery you've presented us with.
Okay.
What did Jesus actually look like?
Yeah.
You've given us this uh, really fascinating mix of sources,
Yeah.
historical analysis. We've got biblical passages. We even have some forensic anthropology in here.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is, and we're going to unpack it all in this deep dive.
Yeah.
But specifically, how depictions of Jesus have evolved
Okay.
and what that tells us about culture and power and belief.
Right.
It's a question that might shake up how we see
Oh, yeah.
the very foundation of Christianity.
It really is. Most of us, we have this very specific image in mind.
Right.
But what if that image is totally wrong?
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with the Bible itself.
Okay.
It's surprising how little it actually says about Jesus's physical appearance.
That silence is really significant.
Yeah.
It's like this blank canvas that lets people project all sorts of interpretations on it.
Oh, interesting.
And we're going to see how that's happened throughout history.
Okay, so there are a few clues in the Bible.
Yeah.
For,
Oh, sure.
like, there's that passage in Revelation that describes Jesus's hair as white wool,
Yeah,
and his feet like burnished bronze.
exactly. And, a lot of scholars see those descriptions as indicating a
Yeah.
darker complexion and hair texture.
So already we're kind of challenging this image of like
Right.
a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus
Yeah, exactly.
right away.
Right from the get-go.
And it makes you think like if those features were so striking,
Yeah.
they would have been mentioned elsewhere, right?
Absolutely. And think about this. The Gospels mention that Judas had to point Jesus out
Oh, right.
to the authorities.
Yeah.
If Jesus had looked completely different from his disciples,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have even been necessary.
That wouldn't have been an issue.
So it suggests that Jesus probably blended in with the average appearance of, people in that area.
That's a good point. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So it really seems like
Okay.
the emphasis was never on his physical appearance,
Right.
but more on his teachings.
Absolutely. The early Christians, they were way more focused on
Yeah.
conveying this spiritual message,
Right.
not creating a photorealistic portrait.
Not making a police sketch.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we know how Jesus was depicted in the early days of Christianity? Especially if we don't have the Bible giving us a clear picture.
Well, we have some clues from early Christian art,
Okay.
like catacomb paintings, for instance,
Okay.
from the 3rd century.
Ah.
They show Jesus as this young, beardless shepherd.
Wow, that is so different from
I know, right?
this long-haired, bearded figure
Well, totally.
we're so used to seeing.
Yeah, and there's even more recent stuff, too.
Really?
There was this 6th century painting found in Israel,
Okay.
and it depicts Jesus with short, curly hair.
So it seems like the image of Jesus was pretty fluid in these early centuries.
Definitely.
Like there wasn't one set image.
No.
Okay, so then things start to get interesting around the 4th century.
Yeah.
We see this shift towards the image we're more familiar with.
Okay.
The long hair, the beard.
Right.
What happened?
Well, it wasn't like somebody found some, long-lost portrait or anything.
Right.
It was really this kind of perfect storm of history and cultural factors. Christianity was becoming more widespread,
Yeah.
more accepted.
More mainstream.
So there was less fear around creating images of Jesus.
Because in the really early days, that was a big no-no.
Yeah, idolatry and all that.
Right. What?
But there's also this other thing going on.
Okay.
The church was gaining power
They're getting power.
and influence.
Yeah.
So they needed to depict Jesus in a way that conveyed authority and divinity.
So they looked at other powerful figures for inspiration,
Exactly.
like emperors and things like that.
Yeah, like think Zeus.
Oh, okay.
These Greek and Roman gods.
Yeah.
That long hair and beard probably comes from those depictions.
Interesting.
So it's less about being accurate to what he actually looked like and more about sending a message.
Okay.
Christ is king, judge divine son.
I see. So they were using this kind of visual language of power
Yeah.
to communicate theological concepts.
Precisely, and that's where we see this emergence of what people often call
Okay.
the white Jesus.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
It's one thing to adopt a certain style,
Right.
right? But portraying Jesus as white,
Yeah.
like a white European,
Yeah.
that wasn't just some random artistic choice, was it?
No, definitely not.
Like there's something else going on here.
Yeah, it reflects the growing power of the church in Europe
Okay.
and how Christianity was being used.
Yes.
And sometimes in really problematic ways to
Wow.
justify colonialism and the idea of white supremacy.
So the image of Jesus becomes this tool for what scholars call
Yeah.
othering,
Right.
Right? And othering is
Defining groups as different or inferior
Yeah.
to justify oppression.
like it creates this visual divide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Us versus them.
And this is where I think the discussion about depictions of Jesus gets really complex
Oh, yeah,
and even uncomfortable.
for sure.
Because this isn't just ancient history.
No, not at all.
The impact of these images is still felt today.
Absolutely.
So to understand how deep this goes,
Yeah.
we need to explore how cultures all around the world have dealt with this image of Jesus,
Yeah.
right? And how it's connected to power and identity.
Okay.
So let's do that.
Sounds good.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
How this image of Jesus has been adapted across different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this human need to connect with the divine,
Yeah.
but in a way that feels familiar.
In a way that feels personal.
Yeah, personal and familiar.
Like a natural impulse. You see a black Jesus in black churches.
Right.
A Chinese Jesus in Chinese art.
Right. It's a way of saying
Yeah.
this story,
Yeah, this figure, this story.
this figure is relevant to me
Yeah.
and my community.
Exactly.
But as we've talked about,
Yeah.
this adaptation can also have a darker side to it,
Yeah.
right? It's not always about just feeling closer.
Right.
It's also about who has the power over that image
Exactly.
and how it's used to reinforce those existing power structures.
It's all about power.
Yeah.
The image of a white Jesus
Yeah.
played a huge role in justifying colonialism and the oppression
Right.
of non-European people.
It's almost like saying, God looks like us.
Exactly.
Therefore, we are chosen,
Right.
we are superior,
We're justified.
and we're justified in our actions.
Yeah, it's like creating this hierarchy.
Well, we see this play out in history,
Oh, yeah.
like in the debates over immigration in the U.S.
Oh, totally.
in the early 1900s.
Early 20th century, yeah.
People were arguing that America should stay a Christian nation,
Right.
implying a very white European
Right.
understanding of Christianity,
Exactly.
and therefore should only let white people in.
It's a very clear example of how
Yeah.
that distorted image of Jesus,
A very specific image of Jesus.
yeah, can be used to promote exclusion.
Yeah, and discrimination.
It's chilling
It is chilling.
to think about how these images have been used.
Yeah, and I think it highlights the importance of being critical
Totally.
of the images we see
Absolutely.
and understanding the historical and social baggage
Yes.
they might be carrying.
For sure.
This makes me think about the counter-reactions to this white Jesus.
Yeah.
The rise of black nationalism
Yeah.
with black Jesus.
Right.
The Hebrew Israelites claiming that Jesus was black.
Yeah.
All these different attempts to kind of reclaim Jesus's identity.
It's about representation.
Yeah.
Right. It's about seeing yourself reflected in the divine.
Yeah.
Challenging how religious imagery
Yeah.
has been used to marginalize people.
So if this traditional Western portrayal is inaccurate,
Right?
what did he actually look like?
Yeah. Is there any way to know?
Is there any way to get closer to that truth?
Well, there have been some really interesting attempts to reconstruct a more historically accurate image.
Like using science.
Yeah, using science and historical methods.
Like Richard Neve,
Yes, exactly.
the forensic anthropologist.
Dr. Nemes.
I remember reading about his work.
He used first-century skulls from the region where Jesus lived
Okay.
and combined that with knowledge of the local population.
Okay.
His reconstruction shows a man with darker skin,
Okay.
dark eyes, and shorter, curlier hair,
Huh.
standing at around 5 feet tall.
Okay, so that's pretty different
Very.
from the images we see in churches.
Yeah, very different from the stained glass windows and the paintings.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And there's other work that supports this too, right?
Oh, yeah, there's Joan Taylor.
Right.
She's a professor of Christian origins
Yeah.
and the author of this book,
Right.
What Did Jesus Look Like?
Catchy title.
Yeah, and she uses archaeological evidence, historical texts,
Okay.
and even ancient Egyptian funerary art
Wow.
to come to a similar conclusion.
So we have science and history, both pointing to this different image of Jesus.
A very different image.
And it kind of brings us back to this idea of ethnicity,
Right.
right? And how it intersects with power,
Yeah.
even in biblical times.
Absolutely. You know, it makes me think about the story of Hagar,
Oh, yeah?
an Egyptian woman, a slave.
Treated as less than
Yeah, treated as less than.
because of her ethnicity and social status.
It's a powerful reminder that these issues
Yeah.
were present even in the biblical world.
They're not new.
No, not at all.
And it makes you think about how Jesus,
Right.
as a Middle Eastern Jew,
Living under Roman occupation,
living under Roman occupation.
might have navigated those same issues.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But you know, the Bible also gives us a different perspective.
Oh.
Like that image from the book of Revelation,
Okay.
where people of all ethnicities are
Yeah.
worshiping God together in heaven.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image of inclusivity,
It really is.
right? Like this idea that there isn't one image of God.
Right.
That diversity is not only accepted,
Yeah.
but it's celebrated.
It's celebrated in the divine realm.
And that makes you wonder, why we've clung to
Yeah.
such narrow depictions for so long.
It's a good question.
And it leads to, I think, a really crucial theological question.
Yeah. What is it?
Does Jesus' physical appearance even matter?
That's the big question, isn't it?
That's a debate that's still going on.
Oh, yeah.
Some would say that his ethnicity is totally irrelevant,
Yeah.
that his message transcends
Right.
those categories.
That it's for everyone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter your background.
But others would argue that acknowledging his Jewish identity
Yes.
is absolutely crucial
Yeah.
to understanding his context.
It's context and the challenges he faced.
It's like trying to understand
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
without acknowledging the reality of racism.
Exactly. To really grapple with his teachings.
Yeah.
You have to understand the world he lived in.
Right.
The power dynamics he was challenging.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like we're seeing two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Like his message is universal,
Absolutely.
but it was also rooted in a specific time and place.
Right.
A specific culture, a specific ethnic identity.
And maybe both of those truths can coexist.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Recognizing his Jewish identity
No.
doesn't diminish the universality of his message. It
Right.
just adds another layer of depth and understanding.
This deep dive has really made me reconsider
Yeah.
all these images I've seen my whole life,
Me too.
And it makes me wonder if Jesus was walking among us today
Yeah.
in our very diverse world.
What would he look like?
What would he actually look like?
Would we even recognize him?
That's a really powerful question.
It is.
And it challenges us to look beyond those preconceived notions.
To see the divine in unexpected places. And to recognize the dignity and worth of every human being,
Regardless of appearance.
regardless of appearance.
This whole deep dive is like this mirror reflecting back not just the historical Jesus,
Right.
but our own biases and assumptions
Totally.
about faith and identity.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has been.
We started with the simple question.
Right.
What did Jesus actually look like?
Yeah.
And we've uncovered so much.
It's amazing how much we've unpacked.
I know.
We've gone from these biblical clues
Yeah.
to ancient catacomb art
Mm-hmm.
to forensic reconstructions and all these different ways that cultures around the world have reimagined Jesus.
In their own image.
Yeah, in their own image.
It's wild.
We talked about the use of religious imagery
Yeah.
to justify power and oppression.
The dangers of othering. The
Yeah.
importance of representation.
And it makes you think like maybe we've been too focused on the physical,
Right.
trying to pin down this specific image.
Yeah.
When the real essence of Jesus,
Lies in his message.
in his actions, in his radical love and compassion.
Right. It's about the transformation that happens within us. Not about external appearances.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It reminds me of that line from John.
Okay.
God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in them.
Yeah.
It's all about embodying that love
Right. In our own lives.
and how we treat others,
Yeah. How we challenge injustice.
how we build bridges.
How we build bridges of understanding.
Exact.
So that challenge, that call to action,
Yeah.
that transcends any specific image.
It's a universal message.
It's a universal message.
That speaks to what it means to be human.
Yeah, to be
Yeah.
connected to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly.
So what are some key takeaways here,
Yeah, okay.
from our deep dive into the real face of Jesus?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that this image of Jesus that's dominated Western culture,
Yeah.
the blonde-haired, blue-eyed figure,
Yeah.
it's probably not accurate.
Right.
Both science and history are pointing to something different.
To a Middle Eastern Jew.
A Middle Eastern Jew.
Reflecting the reality of his life.
The reality of his life and times.
And secondly,
Yeah.
the way Jesus has been depicted
Yeah.
throughout history is deeply intertwined with power dynamics
It's all about power.
and cultural biases.
Absolutely. From Roman emperors to European colonialism,
Yeah.
those in power have shaped the image of Jesus to fit their own agendas.
And we see that
Yeah.
in the evolution of the white Jesus
That's right. And how that image has been used
to justify
to
oppression.
justify oppression and exclusion.
And then lastly,
Yeah.
this debate about Jesus's ethnicity
Huh.
It's not just an academic exercise.
No, it has real implications for how we understand his teachings
Yeah.
and how we live out our faith.
It raises these big questions, right?
Yeah. Do we focus on the universal message of salvation?
Right.
Or do we acknowledge the importance of his Jewish identity?
And the historical context.
Historical context of his ministry.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
What does all of this mean for someone?
Right.
Wrestling with these questions.
Yeah.
Trying to reconcile their faith with these realities of history and culture.
I think the most important thing is to stay curious.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions.
Keep learning.
Keep learning and be open to challenging your own assumptions.
Yeah.
You know, faith is a lifelong journey
It is a journey.
of learning and growing.
Yeah.
And that includes being willing to confront uncomfortable truths.
It's about engaging with the complexities.
Yes.
Not shying away from them.
And remembering
Yeah.
that it's not about what Jesus looked like on the outside.
Yeah.
It's about the message he embodied.
Okay.
That message of radical love,
Yeah.
justice, and compassion
That can change us.
that has the power to transform us.
And the world around us.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful place to end our deep dive.
I agree.
You've given us so much to think about.
I hope so.
A lot to unpack and process.
So if this conversation has sparked something in you, listener, if it's left you with questions, a desire to learn more,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Keep digging, keep exploring.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to challenge those narratives you've been given
Yeah.
and seek out diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
There's so much richness and depth to be discovered
Absolutely.
when we approach faith with open hearts and minds.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving deep.